Hello, welcome to Fundamentals of Internal Auditing. In this episode, we're going to gain a better understanding of the core aspects around risk and also take a look at what COSO has to say about risk categories and risk factors. To help us better understand these topics, we have with us here today Kathleen Crawford, subject matter expert and very knowledgeable about internal audit topics. So, welcome, Kathleen.
Thanks, Hernan. Good to see you.
Nice to see you too. So, what is risk anyway?
What is risk anyway? Well, let's find out. In a generic sense, risk is the possibility that something bad or unpleasant will happen, such as an injury or a loss of some sort. May also be something bad or unpleasant to someone or something. Uh, this is a generic sense. I think what our viewers are really interested in is what comes up next. So, risk in the context of internal auditing is the possibility that events or activities or decisions or actions that are related to the business objectives in a particular audit scope may occur and somehow be harmful to the organization and or prevent the organization or limit the organization from achieving its goals. So it's really
So
quite
this is
specific.
so this is not just risk for the sake of risk or just thinking about a general sense about risk, but really saying we're talking about risk in the context of the organization and how it can potentially limit the opportunity, the ability, and the prospects for achieving goals and objectives, realizing that mission and vision. So is that what this is all about? Is really looking at it from that business centric perspective?
Yes, definitely. And there certainly are instances where it may cause actual harm. So we want to be certain that we have more of a holistic view of what risk might represent. And it does definitely link to objectives of the organization itself, what it's trying to accomplish for its stakeholders, what might involve the processes, systems, and functional areas within the organization. So it really can be thought about in multiple dimensions in terms of likelihood and impact, which is something that we'll talk about more as we go forward. So keeping
So
them
we're
from
thinking.
accomplishing what they want to.
And that can be at the enterprise level, short term, long term. And as you start to look down within the organization, you can even think in terms of, okay, we have errors in transactions. We have someone who could get hurt. We have a system that doesn't work like it's supposed to, or a customer that is disadvantaged by the behavior of an employee. So anything that can go wrong is generally speaking what that is all about.
Definitely, definitely.
S- So when we think about this, then what are some of the effects of risk that is not mitigated?
Wow, I mean, you imagine it, it could happen. And we're not talking about just projecting our fears and concerns onto the enterprise, but really looking at it thoughtfully. Well, let's take a look at this list. There are many effects of unmitigated risk. We could be seeing anything from misappropriation of assets all the way to failure to accomplish established goals and everything in between. So the organization really wants us to be attuned to what it is that they're trying to accomplish in any given area, process, or system, or even holistically, what are they trying to accomplish, and what kinds of things could derail their plans. So uh, an unexpected decision or someone going public with something that could be negative, bad decisions, bribery and corruption, customer dissatisfaction to the degree that they might walk, they might take their business elsewhere, fraudulent financial reporting, erroneous financial reporting, and the associated record keeping and accounting, noncompliance with rules and regulations, acquiring and using resources uneconomically, and as I said, failure to accomplish established goals. So it runs the gamut.
So some of these things have a direct and immediate cost, or if you were to think about just the monetary cost, you can see some of them can be immediate. Whether it's a fraud, it could be particular loss that an asset is no longer operable. So all of those things can be immediate. But you can also have some more intangibles like uh, bad reputation
Hmm.
or a customer who is so unhappy that decides to leave the organization. So once we know, for example, this is one of the things that I remember doing some reviews where we were looking at the average revenue generated and then the profit that each customer brought in, and then we can break it down to the top 10 and the top 20, and you can start to monetize what a bad image or bad customer service is in terms of monetary terms. And then we can start to realize that this is something we really have to pay attention to. So definitely we need to have mechanisms in place to manage those risks closely.
Yes, and even I would argue that uh, a dissatisfied stakeholder, a customer, in these days of social media, the word they could spread the word of their unhappiness broad and wide. And if we don't get on top of that, that could also have an undue effect on an unexpected effect on our reputation.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, so as we look at all of these different things, and it was very helpful to take a look at that list and look in terms of what it means and how some of these things can impact your organization in the short term, long term, directly economically and indirectly economically as well. As we think about organizing those in categories, I guess we can also do something similar where we think within the organization internally and also externally. So let's start with the internal categories and factors. Can you help us understand those better?
absolutely. In fact, COSO has done it for us. So, folks might remember from another episode that we've spoken about the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations. Well, the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations very helpfully produced a list of internal factors and external factors. So, let's look at the risk events categories that are internal first. Issues like infrastructure, issues like process, personnel. We spoke of personnel and human capital, and the most important, that they are our most important asset. Um, Technology. So when I think of internal factors, I think of let's apply a calculus of what might be a strength or a weakness. So, strengths and weaknesses with regard to infrastructure, process, personnel, and technology. So,
So
if
if we're to look at this way, then we can break it down infrastructure, people, process, technology, which help us kind of organize it in a somewhat of a clean way in our heads and be
mhm.
able to better remember when we are about to do our work. So as we're thinking about some of the items that were mentioned, you're looking at some things that are going to be about the structure and reporting lines and clarity of reporting and accountability, and also how we execute. So I used to think of it as built right and run right.
Mhm.
And we want to make sure that both things are going to happen within the organization.
Yeah.
So we have a sense about what's happening within the organization and how we can control those. And generally speaking, we can control those more easily because they are within the confines of the organization.
For
But
sure.
then we have things that are happening outside. So, what are some of those things we need to keep in mind as far as external categories and the factors that we also need to pay close attention to?
Right. Well, no business operates in a vacuum, so it has to be very mindful of its environment, its broader environment. So, with regard to the external factors, I see here the calculus to be opportunities and threats. So, what kinds of opportunities and threats might we have in an economic context? You know, looking from capital availability all the way to our markets. What about a business context? The nature of our competition, industry standards, and a variety of other things. Technological. You might have noticed that technology is mentioned both in the context of an internal factor and now here also as an external factor, particularly with regard to data and commerce and emerging technologies. Natural environment. This is getting an enormous amount of attention these days worldwide. Political, social. Each and every one of these has some context that we need to pay attention to.
It's interesting, as you mentioned, the natural environment dynamics, and of course, in another episode, we're talking about the E's, and one of those was ecology. And I remember an incident with a beverage producer that was having difficulties just getting potable water to
Hmm.
be able to produce their beverages. And if we think about hurricanes, we've had several of those in the news recently. We have dynamics around demographic shift, and you can do all you think about in terms of fixing your processes and your systems and everything. But if you don't understand your customers and the fact that they're becoming maybe younger, maybe they're becoming more urban or suburban or rural, understanding these demographic shifts are also important. So I would imagine a lot of auditors also have to be concerned about these things, which for other individuals, this also may be surprising because they'll say, wow, I thought internal auditors were only looking at what happens within the organization.
Right.
And now you are telling us that that's not the entire universe of internal auditing. Also need to keep an eye out for what's happening outside and
Right.
how these things can create risk and challenge our mission, vision, and our objectives.
Well, and to put it in the context of the process that we've described in a previous episode, it's important that the auditors really pay attention to this early on. This is in the context of risk, of course. So, as we activate a particular project, we see that we're going to start something. I think we have to look inside the organization and outside the organization to see what the relevant risk categories are that we should at least delve into a little bit and try to place the process, system, or functional area in the context of these broader strengths and weaknesses internally, opportunities and threats externally.
Kathleen, this has been great helping us understand these concepts and what these things mean. So I want to thank you very, very much for helping us here and giving us a clear, better understanding of what risk is all about and how we can better categorize and understand internal and external factors that impact the organization that we serve. Thank you so much.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
If you like this series, subscribe to the ACI Learning YouTube channel to enjoy more audit related content.